Hey, Bitcoin wealth builders. Welcome to episode 98 of Bitcoin Hard Talk. We got a lot to be covering today. We're going to get back to our usual format of part one being this week in Bitcoin, part two being this week in macro, and part three being this week in geopolitics. But the main overarching theme is what everybody is still talking about. Who killed Charlie Kirk? Who had the motive to assassinate? But we're obviously going to tie it in with the wider geopolitical content, and we're going to follow the money, and we're going to reach a very different conclusion to what most people that are following the lies of the FBI, following the lies of the media, and following the misinformation in social media, because we're going to tie it into what is the monetary flows and see if we come up with a different conclusion. Now, obviously, we are theorizing and analyzing, and we will never know the truth. We still don't know the truth about some of the biggest conspiracies, including the assassination of JFK decades later. I predict a similar thing. So let's draw some conclusions, make our moves, and figure out what it means and how to protect ourselves in this proof of weapons network that is vastly and very fastly imploding and cannibalizing the West itself after doing it in other regions of the world. So if we have not met already, my name is Simon Dixon. I spent the last 25 years of my life obsessing over the topic of investing and money, and 14 years ago encountered Bitcoin as a resistance against what I now call the proof of weapons network. And that was with peaceful proof of work. And each and every week I go live to make sure that you're on top of the three topics that are now converging on each other as we transition to this world of Bitcoin, AI, and central bank digital currencies, which are going to change everything. And you need to know how to protect yourself. So let's go through what are we going to be covering in each segment. So this week in Bitcoin in part one, I'm going to be sharing everything that happened this week, but also digging deeper into some of the technical aspects around what is this TikTok thing all about? Why is it so important? And what do you need to know to understand how the proof of weapons network integrates, and why they want your Bitcoin and what they are doing to accumulate your Bitcoin? Part two, this week in macro, I'm going to be going through fiscal dominance, the carnage that's happening in Japan, France, UK, how it all impacts the macro and fiscal policy in America, alongside the artificial intelligence, and bring it right round in a circle around why the proof of weapons network is crashing Europe with energy right now, and the energy crisis and the rampant energy inflation that's happening. And then finally, in part three, we're going to be doing this week in geopolitics, and we're going to be answering the question, why would Israel want to assassinate Charlie Kirk? And what are the two other operations so that we can get ahead of them? And is that just a one big conspiracy theory? And even if it is, and even if we don't know the truth, what can we draw from it in order to protect ourselves and understand the next steps? So with that in mind, let's jump straight into part one, this week in Bitcoin. How will they weaponize Bitcoin and TikTok? So we've been talking about these different proof of weapons network, fiat currency, debt-based Ponzi scheme, weapons that have been created in order to get between you and your Bitcoin. Make sure that you are stuck in the fiat currency debt-based Ponzi scheme, locked up in a capital markets, so that BlackRock and the financial institutions have more power and control over you, rather than you having more power and more autonomy and more sovereignty. And so I've always talked about the different weapons. They are Bitcoin treasury stocks to make sure you don't own Bitcoin and you own a stock with some humans in the middle instead. Bitcoin ETFs, rather than owning Bitcoin direct, having a stock that represents Bitcoin. And of course, stablecoins or central bank digital currencies. At the moment, we're beta testing the stablecoin standard in the US. And in October, we're launching the CBDC beta standard in the European Union. This is all tools and weapons of the fiat currency proof of weapons network to come between you and your exited Bitcoin proof of work. So I want to ask you a question for those long-term listeners of Bitcoin Hard Talk. If you're new to the show, I'm sorry if you got fooled. But the long-term listeners would have known not to buy any of these Bitcoin treasury companies on the stock market. So my question to you, did you get fooled by the Nakamoto public treasury company and all the hype that came with it when David Bailey said he would smash buy $1 billion of Bitcoin in one day at the top of the market? What has happened since then? Well, the stock is now down 96% from the top of the overhyped stock market, proof of weapons network, capital market, collateralized Bitcoin obligation, credit default swap Bitcoin, shitcoin, tokenized, securitized, and financialized version of Bitcoin with 65 different middlemen and counterparty risk and humans and stupid things in the middle. In fact, it went down 50% in one day as a result of you deciding that you want to have somebody else buy your Bitcoin for you, and that you're going to rely upon someone else saying that I'm going to buy startups and I'm going to invest in different things and I'm going to leverage the Bitcoin. And now David Bailey goes down in the Bitcoin Hall of Fame as the Bitcoin treasury guy, where the stock went 96% off its peak. And there were probably some beautiful little insiders that dumped their stock on top of you and then bought Bitcoin with it. I hope that this is an investment lesson for you. And we all have to learn the hard way. I've made every mistake under the sun. In fact, if you go to my blog on simondixon.com, go to the blog section and type in mistakes, you'll find a blog post where I go through all of my mistakes. I've been involved since 2011, 14 years. I made every single mistake for you. And I've drawn upon the conclusion that all you need to do is simplify your life and own Bitcoin in self-custody. And there are a multitude of reasons why you need to do that. But I really hope anybody that was involved in that has learned something. And they're not now looking for the next shitcoin cycle and when altcoin cycle is going to come and what the next meme coin is. And they didn't end up buying some congressman in America that is launching their shitcoin and their meme coin. And you're not falling for that. And instead, you are learning how to self-custody. And I hope some of you followed my advice and actually went for the weekend and studied the free guide that I gave everybody that you can find on my blog on how to self-custody your Bitcoin with Andreas Antonopoulos and myself that went through that. That's completely free for you on simondixon.com when you become a free member of Bitcoin Hard Talks membership portal. What other things did we see? Well, the best Bitcoin treasury company, the one that I speculate is controlled by the asset Michael Saylor, and that is Strategy. Now, they were meant to be listed on the S&P 500, and so they had a bit of a correction in their share price because it wasn't included in the S&P 500. What does that mean? Including on the S&P 500 means you get wrapped into ETFs. And when you get wrapped into ETFs, it means all of those passive investors that don't own their own Bitcoin in self-custody and rely upon BlackRock to buy those 500 stocks for them because they can't buy those 500 stocks individually, it means that you give more power to BlackRock to become a passive investor, and they have to buy more and more shares in Strategy. And as they accumulate a bigger position in Strategy, they will influence the direction of the company and make sure that Strategy and Michael Saylor becomes a member, a person that works for the board, and the board works for the shareholders. And the largest shareholder has influence over the board, and you become an asset for the Proof of Weapons Network. Once you are an asset for BlackRock and the Proof of Weapons Network, you become part of a portfolio management theory. And when they need to turn Strategy into a discount to net asset value on the Bitcoin, they have the tools and the ability to do that. And when they need to acquire it at a discount, should they choose, they have the ability and the tools to do that. And you are subjecting yourself to those market forces. But if you own Bitcoin in self-custody, you do what BlackRock's doing. You keep your Bitcoin, you don't worry about them. And that month, when you're buying Bitcoin every month, you get to buy it cheaper. And the more they dump the price down, the more you get to accumulate more with your fiat currency. So Strategy was not included in the S&P 500. I am pretty sure it will be at some point, because Robinhood also was another portfolio company, an early company I invested in. They're now in the S&P 500 from their crypto play, their tokenized play, and a regulated broker that allows people to buy stocks and has a very large retail community. I am pretty sure MicroStrategy, sorry, now it's called Strategy, will be there eventually, and it will be majority held by State Street, Vanguard, and BlackRock, and a tool for the proof of weapons network eventually. So I'm sure it will be there soon. I hope you've learned your lessons, but that is their number one weapon. The number one weapon in their Bitcoin industrial complex that Wall Street is looking to acquire in this two-tiered Bitcoin economy. Bitcoin with them and Bitcoin with us. And you want to be with us in self-custody rather than Bitcoin with them, so that they can engage in all the pump and dumps on the short time, because we now have this fixed money supply that Wall Street can't change. So what do? They look to get your Bitcoin. They can acquire Bitcoin at a discount whenever they choose to net asset value, as I said, and they can do all sorts of tricks as well. So what else are they building right now? Well, they are building 3 new weapons, and they are launching them as fast as they possibly can in this transition to a multipolar world where there will be currency wars. And in fact, there are currency wars, because the dominant dollar is going through exactly what we're going to be describing in part 2, a weakening of the dollar strategically by the proof of weapons network that is a global institution that is invested in multipolarity. And so what are they launching in the Bitcoin market or the crypto market? Well, weapon 1, the new weapon of the 3 new weapons, is about to be launched. They got approval for a crypto index ETF. This means that passively, they won't just be buying Bitcoin, they'll be buying shitcoins. And everybody will pile in saying, what else do I have to buy apart from Bitcoin? They can't distinguish between the crypto market and the Bitcoin market. And so they'll be looking for additional returns. And that means that passively, the more people that invest in it, the more they'll have to buy all the other cryptos. And as BlackRock gets more and more crypto, they'll apply, just like they are for ETH right now, in order to stake that and be influential in the governance of that. Because only Bitcoin is proof of work in those top cryptocurrencies. And this one is proof of stake, which means by owning the currency, you get a vote in the network, just like a share. Whereas Bitcoin doesn't do that. By owning it, you don't get a vote. You get a vote by running a node, and you get a vote by mining, and you get a vote by holding it in self-custody, and you get a vote by contributing to the open source developer community. And obviously, they would like to attack all of those different parts of the ecosystem so that they can pump and dump crypto that the Silicon Valley VCs all got their insider deals and dirty little mutts on those pre-mined fiat currency shitcoins that everybody's looking through ignorance to try and find out whether it's going to become the next Bitcoin. And hopefully over time, you will learn what is the difference between Bitcoin and crypto. Crypto is a tool of the proof of weapons network. And with crypto ETF funds, they're going to become significant holders, not only at the Silicon Valley level when they do the pre-mined shitcoin venture capital deals in order to pump up the illiquid stocks that they can't sell and try and generate additional returns to attract more capital so that they can leverage it and borrow more and then dump it on your 401k pension now that Trump is opening it up to private equity. And they will obviously want to stake any proof of stake in order to gain control over these different quote unquote decentralized networks. Understand the difference with Bitcoin? Now, what is the regulators doing in order to facilitate this deregulated environment within the crypto industry? Well, from now on in, anything that has a futures market on Coinbase, i.e. Coinbase has created a financial weapon of mass destruction in order to manipulate and hedge the price of these different crypto shitcoins. They can now, as long as there is a futures market, they can apply to have an ETF. And so if you can persuade the new gatekeeper, Coinbase, in order to create a futures market and create a financial weapon of mass destruction so that people can short and make money off the down and the up, then based upon that, you can then get an ETF, and then BlackRock can control a massive chunk of your network. And then they can get more and more of the different parts of the ecosystem so that BlackRock can take us to this Orwellian real world asset, tokenized everything nightmare that the proof of weapons network wants to take us to. All because you couldn't see the difference between crypto and Bitcoin. So anybody that has a futures market on Coinbase can now apply to get an ETF, and there will be an accelerated and fast track process in order to get your financial weapon of mass destruction approved by the Securities and Exchange Commission for trading, so that nobody owns that asset, they own a stock instead. This is the BlackRock playbook. This is why they created Aladdin technology, in order to get the Federal Reserve to use it so that they could buy Barclays iShares and crash various parts of the during the global financial crisis. And their technology was used by the Fed in order to basically borrow some money, give it to BlackRock so that they could buy Barclays iShares, so that all these ETFs were under one roof, which is now an $11 trillion asset manager. This is the BlackRock playbook. That is weapon number one that they are building. And all of the newbies, all of those crypto decentralized number go up, pump and dump gamblers are all cheering back BlackRock along, because all they care about is gambling rather than investing and building something sustainable that can allow them to escape the proof of weapons network. They are empowering the proof of weapons network. That's why we need more and more people to watch Bitcoin Hard Talk, because weapon number two is being constructed as we speak. NASDAQ has now filed with the SEC to allow tokenization and blockchain listings of stocks. So it's not enough for them to take a company and turn it into a security. It's not enough to financialize it with derivatives. It's not enough to create a tokenized insurance type of product. It's not enough for them. Now they need to create a shitcoin on a stock, on a derivative, on a company, and go further and further down the curve. Why? Because 70% of the whole US economy is service-based. And what is the largest sector in the service-based economy? Financial services. And so financializing and getting financial weapons of mass destruction is a vital part of rolling over this debt-based fiat currency proof of weapons net Ponzi scheme. So that is the Goldman Sachs playbook. So now we got weapon one, the crypto ETF fund. We got weapon two, which is the tokenization and securitization of stocks on blockchain. And what else have they got? Weapon number three. Yes, it's the covert central bank digital currency, i.e. known as a stablecoin. And while stablecoin have their advantages, it is full reserve banking backed by the credit rating and the debt of the US government. It is still a financial weapon of mass destruction for the proof of weapons network. So we had an announcement from Tether, and Tether is going to be launching USAT. USAT is basically it's US regulated dollar-backed stablecoin under the Genius Act. And the Genius Act was a mechanism for finding a new market to dump all of America's debt on so they can roll over the debt-based Ponzi scheme, and at the same time perpetuate weapons of mass destruction through the dollar stablecoins around the world in a desperate last grasp. Because when we go through the macro, people are selling those treasuries outside America as they buy gold and exit the dollar as their reserve assets. So who did Tether appoint in order to have this newly regulated, Genius Act compliant US stablecoin? Well, he went to the White House and he hired Bo Hines. And so the CEO of Tether, USAT, is now Bo Hines after his career within the White House under David Sachs from the PayPal mafia, while Elon Musk builds his stablecoin social credit score nightmare, and Trump builds his World Liberty Financial stablecoin nightmare. And all of the banks and financial institutions take the Genius Act and turn their reserves at the Federal Reserve into a stablecoin nightmare. And they get to have competitive where they can pay the yield and other people can't pay the yield, while Trump goes around, does deals that allows for dollars to be perpetuated around the world, backed by dollars in his stablecoin, so he can cut himself millions and millions of dollars as the price of the US debt and the yield goes further and further higher. Of course, presidents are not elected, they are selected by this proof of weapons network. And their reward is they get rich as they steal from everyday Americans, everyday Europeans, everyday Brits, everyday Australians, everyday Canadians, and anybody that Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan managed to financialize and securitize into an ETF. So BlackRock becomes the asset manager of that country with no affiliation, no loyalty, no nationalism, and no care for the population, as long as they can get their cut and they get their quarterly returns. And in fact, speaking of quarterly returns, a bit of a side point, Trump put forward that they want to move from quarterly reporting to 6 monthly reporting. That's how it's actually done in Japan, or maybe even annual reporting. I'm not sure if this is going to progress. There's a couple of sides to that. It can inspire a bit more long-term thinking, but knowing the proof of weapons network is a vital tool for them to commit more fraud in that 1 year and not have to have the oversight of quarterly public reports. It's a bit of a debate, but at the same time, remember Tether, they announced in 2024 that they made $13 billion of profit, making them more profitable than both BlackRock and Citibank on full reserves. And so Tether getting into the US market is essentially a way of maintaining and trying to do it compliantly. We'll see what happens in this two-tiered stablecoin market with Tether with all the vast liquidity. But what is behind Tether outside of the US? Well, now Tether is the largest holder of US treasuries as a stablecoin, of course, but in the entire world, it is ranked number 18. That means that it owns more US treasuries than the country of Germany, the country of South Korea, and the country of Australia. 3 nodes on the proof of weapons network. The central bank, or the Reichsbank, when it was replaced and worked with the Bank for International Settlements, and after the fall of the Berlin Wall, when you had the German central bank, it just became a node for this dollar perpetuation through the euro dollar market. Australia, another node, and South Korea, after the Korean War as well, another node for the technical industrial complex, as well as the financial industrial complex. So this is essentially weapon number 3 is the JP Morgan playbook. Use money creation and getting the government deeper and deeper into debt in order to provide a digital dollar, which was constructed in Jekyll Island in 1910, that led to the Federal Reserve Act in 1913 and the creation of all dollars under the shareholders of the Federal Reserve, like the JP Morgan Chases and various other banks and members as well. So this is essentially, stable coins is one weapon that they can use in order to make you the bag holder of US debt. Now, there was a bit of a conspiracy theory circulated around from some of the members of Russia. And in Russia, some of the members of the government claimed that the US is using crypto policy as a weapon. And so interestingly, they use the same language. I wonder if these people are watching Bitcoin Hard Talk. I wonder how far we are getting in terms of people watching it. I rely upon you being able to share it so that more and more people can see it. But it's interesting that people are starting to declare some of these crypto products as weapons. And so what was his name? Sorry if I butcher this name. Anton Kobyakov. He basically serves an advisor to Putin on international issues. And his statement basically accuses the US of using cryptocurrency. Let me make sure I get. So cryptocurrency promotion in order to manage their $37 trillion national debt. So I'll quote from the translation, and obviously I don't know how accurate the translation is, but a video circulated with the translation underneath it. Quote, stablecoins like USDC, which was created by Circle, that I, full disclosure, was a investor in a long time ago when they were a Bitcoin business, and USDT, Tether is partner with Bitfinex. I invested in Bitfinex after they had the 2016 hack in order to support victims. And so they essentially, full disclosure that is, they are digital currencies tied to the dollar and backed by US Treasury securities, as we explained. So every single stable coin, you put $1 into the bank account, a new stable coin unit is minted, which represents $1. It can be traded in for $1. And then they take that dollar and they buy some treasuries, lend it to the US government. The US government then has to pay a yield in exchange for that. And then they take that yield and they buy Bitcoin and then they invest it in Bitcoin mining. So that's what Tether does. But they're pushing stable coins as a mechanism for pushing US debt. And so the claim is, the allegation is that US pushes global adoption of stablecoins, which indirectly funds its debt by increasing demand for treasuries. That's true. Quote, once adopted widely, US could initiate or devalue the dollar. Now, this is a bit silly. Of course they're going to do that. They always devalue the dollar. Now, there's two parts of devaluing the dollar. One is devaluation of those locally that spend in dollars. And the dollar's lost 99% of its value ever since the creation of the Federal Reserve. But then there's the international markets, which is the dollar priced in other currencies. And we'll go through it in the macro that it is actually being weakened relative to other shitcoins and other nodes in the proof of weapons network. And for the dollar to be weakened relative to them is quite an achievement, because the dollar is a shitcoin, but the rest of them are meme coins relative to the shitcoin. And so the claim is that it will devalue the dollar, slashing the real value of that debt. So the debt, you basically roll over the debt, you devalue the dollar, which means that the $37 trillion is now worth less in real time. So if you price dollars in gold, the price is crashing, 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 crashing. If you owe $37 trillion and you can dump it on somebody else, then in real time, you're losing value relative to other currencies and gold. And so global stablecoin holders would suffer losses as their assets lose purchasing power. Now, I get the claim, but this is how the system works anyway, because it's a debt-based Ponzi scheme. So the stablecoin, while it is true, everything he is saying, it is true even if they don't do the stablecoin strategy, because this is just systemically how the dollar works. It is a Ponzi scheme. He then goes on to say, this mirrors US actions in 1933 when it hiked gold prices to devalue the dollar by about 40% amid the Great Depression, which is true. And so by hiking gold prices, when the gold price goes up, the value of the dollar goes down. You can buy less gold with your dollar. And then we had the pump of the 1920s, the roaring 20s, followed by the Federal Reserve constricting the market and then sending the market into the Great Depression. And then the Great Depression led to the confiscation of all gold, where Americans were forced to hand in their gold and swap it for a Federal Reserve note. But by hiking the price of gold, then you got less gold for your Federal Reserve note. And this was done during the Depression in order to, devalue essentially the debt that was created from World War I. So it also echoes, quote, it also echoes the 1971 when President Nixon ended the dollar gold convertibility, allowing dollar devaluation to ease economic pressures, which is absolutely true. In 1971, the US had to default on its debt after the Korean War. You had Nixon that was after, you had essentially John F. Kennedy. After his assassination, there was LBJ. After LBJ, then there was Nixon. And the Nixon shock in 1971 was when they defaulted on their post-World War II Bretton Woods order, where they forced the world to go onto a dollar standard with the belief, with the promise that you could convert your dollars into gold. Because after all the wars, 75% of all the world's gold ended up in Fort Knox. Now, I believe the Federal Reserve has collateralized it many times over because there's no ledger, there's no blockchain, there's no auditability, there's no properties like Bitcoin where there will only ever be 21 million. You can mine more gold as the price goes up. But anyway, this absolutely did happen. And in 1971, America effectively defaulted on its gold, and the world entered into the fiat currency standard. We're over 50 years into that experiment right now, where the whole world ends up this dollar milkshake theory, essentially. Everybody ends up having to accumulate dollars and then lend it to the US government. And then the US government perpetuates covert wars in order to force everyone onto a dollar standard. And from that, terrorism essentially got a deal with the Saudi Arabia where they could price their oil in dollar, creating the petrodollar, create Europe into a dependency, creating the euro dollar. Because they had 75% of the gold, price that gold convertibility in dollars, which they defaulted on, and then build out the military industrial complex where you had to buy your military equipment in dollars, the financial industrial complex where they use the dollar as a tool for financial weapons of mass destruction through the IMF and debt slavery, and also the consumer industrial complex where they used all of this debt in order to build products, so people had to buy them in dollars. And then you had this massive overvaluation of dollars that we're in right now, where China became the manufacturing base, America became the consumer, and now we're resetting that order based upon the trade flows. But the proof of weapons network has now fully vassalized America, and that is a global network of financiers that are investing globally with no America First agenda. Well, anyway, this creates the economic pressures, and that's what has led to the creation of that proof of weapons network as well, where governments are subordinate to the financial industrial complex that was built there as well. So anyway, basically the suggestion was, and it's a little bit of a convoluted argument, there's truth there, there's some history to learn, but that's how the system is designed anyway, without the stablecoin or with the stablecoin. But certainly they are using the stablecoin to try and roll over that debt-based Ponzi scheme due to the lack of external foreign demand for those dollars, as more and more are moving to gold right now. And Bitcoin is becoming a tool in the currency war, which is why they've created so many weapons in the US by the proof of weapons network to get your Bitcoin, rather than you hold it in self-custody. And that, if there ever is a confiscation, will be the Bitcoin that's confiscated, and you will most likely receive some kind of stable coin or central bank digital currency, depending on where we are in the cycle. So anyway, this kind of suggests that the US is going to devalue the debt by promoting stable coins. And this is essentially crypto tied to USD, backed by US treasuries, which is driving global adoption in order to fund that debt. Once they've done that, once they've got their stablecoin adoption, they're going to pump and boost the price of Bitcoin and gold to basically draw value away from fiat currencies, while basically using Fed-backed systems like JP Morgan and various other nodes in the proof of weapons network in order to maintain that USD dominance. And at some point, they can decide when they want to crash a system, and you, as somebody that has it in self-custody, will just be able to buy it cheaper, and you'll be immune from such pressures, which is why it's so important to self-custody. Okay. Okay, I think that's enough on that story anyway. What else did we have? So the Trump family knows this. The Trump family are trying to accumulate desperately as much Bitcoin as possible and launch stable coins so that they can buy as much Bitcoin as possible because they know what's coming. While they're telling you that they're making America great again, they're hedging against America and the dollar using Bitcoin. So the Trump family has now added $1.3 billion to their net worth, it was reported, due to Bitcoin and their crypto investments, according to Bloomberg. I estimate it is probably more than that, but they are on a rampage to short the dollar and long Bitcoin while they implement the policies to do this crypto scheme and stablecoin scheme as well. And what else do they need in order to do that? Well, they need partnerships. And those partnerships relate to the macro environment as well. So it was announced this week that the US and the UK, yes, that's the same UK, where I went and met Boris Johnson and told him about the Bitcoin Strategic Reserve Strategy in 2013 through the UK Digital Currency Association that I was a founding director of when I was trying to support the UK in not ending up in the situation that they are right now and building a Bitcoin Strategic Reserve and making it legal tender. And Boris Johnson laughed me out of the room, is now being told by the US via Trump, who is subordinate to the financial industrial complex that is a node in the proof of weapons network, that they need to partner with the US and the UK in order to announce their new crypto cooperation deal, which means that they will stablecoin, tokenize, and financialize every aspect of the UK economy so that it can be weaponized for BlackRock's interest against the interest of the British people. That is what this is all about. And they won't build any Bitcoin strategic reserve. My understanding is that UK confiscated about 60,000 Bitcoin that they still have. And I don't think they sold it like Germany, but maybe we'll get an announcement that they have sold it. We're still trying to figure out whether the US has any or what the extent of their Bitcoin strategic reserve is. And we're still trying to figure out whether the US is going to audit that gold. And I think it's there. But I also think it is on both the Federal Reserve balance sheet and the Treasury balance sheet. And that was all the gold that was stolen from the American people, taken away from all the colonialism and the transfer from the British Empire to the American Empire, transferred from Russia when it was replaced by communism in the Soviet Union and Wall Street funded the Bolsheviks, and also the German gold when the Bank for International Settlements transferred the gold that was confiscated from Czechoslovakia and various other countries that the Nazi regime was invading and transferred it over to the Federal Reserve, which created this Bretton Woods system, which created the promise of the 75% of gold backing, which led to the default in 1971 and the remnants of the final moments of the debt-based Ponzi scheme that we are experiencing right now that is creating so much wealth inequality. We'll be covering much more about that in part 2 as well, which is why you need to protect yourself with Bitcoin, because fiat currency is designed to break you, turn you into a debt slave, lose your value so that you need to give more time to exchange more of your time for less value while you'll become a node for pushing up the value of assets for those that own assets, while you're putting your money in a bank account that they can take from you at any point, that is like a melting ice cube that is making you poorer and poorer and poorer as you save more in the shitcoin fiat currency proof of weapons network, whether that be GBP or USD or euro or yen or whatever it may be. It's going to be used as a way for the US to further vassalize the UK, and they're going to use stable coins and tokenize real world assets, and that's going to be the extent of the partnership. It ain't going to be good for Britain. It's going to be great for the proof of weapons network, which you only profit from if you own US shares and US assets, or you exit the system with Bitcoin or gold. But this train is never going to get stopped. If you are a neighbor of America, you're going to be pushed into that scheme as well. And so to commemorate this, what did Trump do? There was a picture that circulated around on X of Trump is a golden statue, the president of Trump, holding up a Bitcoin, which was placed outside the US Capitol while he visits Buckingham Palace in the UK and sits around a table with all of the most important members of the Proof of Weapons network that he essentially works for, in confiscating wealth and giving people a golden statue of Trump holding up Bitcoin to rub it in your face that while the Proof of Weapons network was taking over the almighty US empire, switching it into a multipolar world, creating a K-shaped economy that's causing civil unrest within America, Europe, UK, across the whole network, he is there saying, I got your Bitcoin, I got your gold, and I put a statue here while I celebrate in Buckingham Palace with King Charles and the remnants of the Rothschild families and those that created this system, and sit around the dinner table while so many Americans are broke, pretending to make America great again. So it's all very symbolic. So what I wanted to do as the final part of this, before I go through part two, is I wanted to go through some of the different technologies on the Proof of Weapon network. And I thought this would be the appropriate place. I didn't know whether to cover it here or in the macro section, but I thought I'd cover it here. And that is that I want you to understand how these deals, like with TikTok, I wanted to create a bit of an educational piece from my background when I worked in investment banking, investing in private equity and various other experiences. I wanted to break down this TikTok deal. So we're meant to get an announcement today of how the TikTok deal is constructed. And there is a December deadline. And it's being negotiated between Trump, we're told, who is a proxy for the Proof of Weapons network, where he is subordinate to them. He's negotiating a deal for them, not for Americans, and negotiating with China. And obviously China is sovereign because no company, there is we covered in previous episodes, the Shanghai Proof of Weapons network, but because they have a state banking system and the government doesn't let a corporation get bigger than the CCP, I went through the nuances and differences. You're welcome to go back on my blog and check in Shanghai Proof of Weapons network if you want to understand the difference between the US private one and the China one. But they are negotiating, and by December, we should have a deal. And so, Azad, I'm going to ask you to play our first AI summary where I took the construct of what we know about the deal and combined it with some educational material so that you understand how this financialized and securitized globalist type of construct works. So, Azad, let's play the first video on TikTok.
Welcome to the deep dive. So, you've probably seen the headlines about TikTok. The U.S. government wants its American operations sold off by the end of 2025. Officially, it's all about national security, right? Protecting user data from, foreign eyes. But today, we're looking at some analysis that suggests there's something deeper going on, that this isn't just regulation, it's strategic consolidation.
Exactly. We want to unpack this idea of the Proof of Weapons Network, POW for short. The argument here is that the TikTok deal isn't really about banning something perceived as a threat. It's more about pulling this huge platform into an existing American power structure.
Okay, POW network, we'll definitely get into that. But first, maybe let's just quickly lay out the deal itself. What are the basics? So by December 2025, TikTok US gets spun off. About 80% U.S. investor ownership, a mostly American board, and this is critical. One board member appointed directly by the U.S. government, plus all the U.S. user data has to live on Oracle servers here in the States. That's the mandate.
Mm-hmm. And that requirement, the Oracle part especially, fits right into this POW network concept. Now, when we say POW network, it's important to understand this isn't some, backroom conspiracy theory. It's presented as a structure.
A structure, not a conspiracy. Okay, what's the distinction there? You mean it's more about how the system is inherently set up, like market forces and who holds the money?
Precisely. It's about how capital flows, how technology gets used, how finance operates, even how consumption patterns are shaped. It's systemic. These different parts, they don't necessarily need secret meetings to coordinate. Their interests, their balance sheets, they're already intertwined. And this structure, it leans on four main interlocking complexes.
All right, let's break those down for everyone. You mentioned the first, the FIC, Financial Industrial Complex.
That's the big one. Think global asset managers, BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street, huge players. They provide stability through passive investments like ETFs, index funds, but they also wield massive influence through voting shares, ESG mandates, and you've got banks like JP Morgan acting as sort of shock absorbers, and private equity Blackstone, KKR, as the, let's say, financial enforcers restructuring companies.
Okay, FIC, got it. Then there's the TAC, Technical Industrial Complex, big tech.
Right. Your Apples, Microsofts, Googles, they look independent, but they're deeply connected to government through subsidies, export rules, huge Pentagon contracts. And, crucially, they rely on those big FIC banks for capital, for buybacks, things like that.
Makes sense. Then the more obvious one, the MIC Military Industrial Complex.
Yeah, Lockheed Martin, companies like that, they have guaranteed customers, basically, thanks to defense budgets, less exposed to normal market ups and downs.
And the last one, the CIC, Consumption Industrial Complex. This is where TikTok fits in.
Exactly. Platforms like TikTok, Facebook, YouTube, they're described as attention pipelines. They shape culture, deliver ads, but increasingly they're seen as tools for, well, information campaigns, maybe even psychological operations.
So bringing it back to TikTok, the argument is the deal isn't just about data privacy worries. It's about integrating this massive CIC asset directly into that whole POW system.
That's the core idea, binding it in.
Okay, so how does the money side, the FIC control, make that happen? We know U.S. investors like Oracle, Silver Lake, KKR are involved in the potential purchase.
Right. But here's the twist. Who owns large chunks of Oracle, Silver Lake, KKR, and pretty much every other major player? It's those same big three passive managers. BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street. Their ownership is everywhere.
So even if the direct owners change, the ultimate financial oversight, the governance layer from the big asset managers stays in place. It just gets tighter.
Pretty much. The capital structure gets locked into the existing financial governance framework.
Which makes the TikTok integration via Oracle really significant. It's the physical choke point, like you said. Hosting the data domestically under U.S. law, using infrastructure potentially linked to government and intelligence needs, and the algorithm itself, even if licensed, runs under U.S. technical supervision.
Exactly. That's the technical binding.
And then the MIC leverage and CIC absorption. TikTok isn't making weapons, obviously.
No, but controlling the information flow, shaping what millions of people see and talk about, that's incredibly powerful in today's world. Think hybrid conflict, narrative control. So folding TikTok US into this framework means aligning that cultural influence, that consumption engine, with broader US strategic goals as defined by the POW network.
It really reframes the whole justification, doesn't it? The official line is accusing China of potential influence.
Which leads to this idea of accusation is a confession. The analysis suggests the U.S. isn't just neutralizing a perceived threat, it's seizing the same tool for itself. Instead of asking for a back door into the data like in the past, they're essentially building a front door by mandating this structure.
So at the end of the day, who actually wins in this scenario?
According to this framework, it's the overarching financial industrial complex. The huge asset managers, the private equity firms, their power comes from controlling the capital, the balance sheets. Nationality is secondary to the system itself.
So the takeaway really is TikTok US isn't being saved or secured in the way most people think. It's being absorbed.
Absorbed by capital, yeah.
Yeah.
And repurposed within this proof of weapons system, it becomes a strategic asset.
Governed less by the free market and more by financial structures and intelligence oversight.
That's the final thought, really. It becomes a permanent part of that POW network infrastructure. A fascinating and maybe slightly unsettling way to look at it.
Okay, so always remember, Oracle, where did it come from? Remember the way that the system is constructed. The debt-based Ponzi scheme always needs to roll over debt. That means that the largest borrower is through the US Treasury market. Stablecoins is a new mechanism for increasing and rolling over that debt. That debt needs a bigger and bigger budget, which means you always need justification for war. The US military-industrial complex feeds into the financial industrial complex and the technical industrial complex and consumption. And so to roll over the debt forever, they need to create narratives. Those narratives are pushed through the media. the media has now become social media. And so they need to control the algorithms in order to make you believe that you're always in danger. And when you're in danger, they profit from wars and make you think that you're the good people. And these CIA assets like Oracle are created as companies where essentially that budget that they stole from you, if you don't own assets, then you pay the inflation, you become a debt slave, but those people that own the assets benefit from the appreciation. So the government gets bigger and bigger and bigger based upon this Federal Reserve System. They have to always issue more treasuries. They end up being a bigger and bigger part of the economy. Wealth inequality goes further and further to the left and the right. And then you have these fake entrepreneurs that are given Pentagon budget technology that was created by the government, that is then privatized, financialized, tokenized, securitized, and turned into these products where they get to pretend they're these genius entrepreneurs because they get access through the Cantillon effect to borrow money at 0% or cheapest interest rates so they can pump up the price of their stocks. And you call this capitalism. This certainly ain't capitalism, because capitalism requires hard money. So how do you enter into a hard money environment? You have to exit the system if you want to be in hard money. There's only two ways I know of doing that. That's gold and Bitcoin. And Bitcoin's the only one that allows you to do it in the digital sphere with auditable supply, where the supply doesn't increase the higher the price goes. And no central bank can control that. And so all they can do is persuade you to own your Bitcoin with them rather than you holding it in self-custody. And so always remember, Oracle is just a node in this construct. And it is CIA funded in the beginning. And they make you think that this is something else, but it was made with Pentagon budgets, just like Elon Musk, just like Peter Thiel. And they have to work for this financial industrial complex. And so then they may be able to borrow money into their VC funds, where they get to control the cost of capital or the ability to access capital, and they get to be shareholders in all of these crony capitalist deals. So you have Silver Lake, you have Andreessen Horowitz, you have KKR. Some of them are public companies, and they are vassalized into the network, and therefore they're able to manipulate markets, and they have partnerships with this TikTok deal will be General Atlantic and various other people and nodes in the network. And what are they going to do with this? Well, this is one step closer to the US social credit score. You got a FICO score. You've got Palantir contracts that are using pre-crime social scraping and data. You got all of your data being centralized. You got stable coins. You got real world assets. You got programmable centralized money. And then what are you going to be doing? You're going to be combining it with nodes from the Pentagon budgets like Elon Musk that pretends he's giving you freedom of speech. He gives you freedom of speech so that you can keep talking. And when you talk, you provide the algorithm. They won't give you freedom of reach if they don't like your message. And it will be integrated into your stable coin. And you can cheer it all along thinking that America is winning while it turns the whole system into this end game of what the Federal Reserve wanted to do in the first place, which is what the Bank of England did to Britain, bankrupted the country, reset the world order, and moved to a different order. When it was the British Empire, they had a new host country to move it over to, a vast manufacturing base with vast resources, which was the American Empire. And the American Empire switched from colonialism to neocolonialism via financialization, securitization, and now tokenization. And nothing changed there. It's the same model. So that is where we are at the moment. And that is why TikTok is an important component. I just wanted to give you that. And we just got one final story before we move to part two. It's a very short story. But Kazakhstan, the president of Kazakhstan has basically ordered the creation of a Bitcoin strategic reserve for its country. So we may have countries that want to remain sovereign or free themselves from the IMF or the Belt and Road Initiative and be able to fight back against the proof of weapons network at a sovereign country level. So we will keep watching Kazakhstan, as we will keep watching the Kingdom of Bhutan and El Salvador and various other countries that are going for this strategy. And we will keep covering it within Bitcoin Hard Talk. Now, just before we move over to part 2, I want to point to a few resources. We are about 1 or 2 subscribers away from 102,000 subscribers. We got our little YouTube silver Proof of Weapons Network medal. And in case YouTube decides that they want to take us out, there's a few things I need your help with. Firstly, make sure the algorithm, put a comment below, like, share, subscribe, hit the bell symbol, hit all, so that you get notifications. They don't give me traffic. I rely upon you. And also, if this gets shut down, Tether has actually invested in Rumble. So that's a different type of network. And they're looking at doing Bitcoin Lightning integration and various other things. I'd like you to go to Rumble right now and start getting ready in case we get censored over here. So go to Rumble, type in Simon Dixon, and follow me over on Rumble, because we're going to be doing some more streams over there as well. So make sure you come over there, and we'll start doing some more exclusive ones as we get more and more of a following. Now go over to Apple if you use Apple, or Spotify if you're on Android, and go to your favorite podcast app and type in Bitcoin Hard Talk. This way, when we give these long talks, you can download them and you can chunk them down into pieces and watch them bit by bit while you're driving, while you're in the gym, and you can help me have a backup in case YouTube and Rumble cancel me. And so then you've got Apple and Spotify, and I know we're in all the different Proof of Weapons Network nodes, but I have to be productive. I boycott wherever I can, but at the same time, we've got to get our message out, and we've got to play within the confines of what we do. I test out various decentralized ones. Put in the comments section right now. I've gone on to Nostr and various other ones. But let me know in the comments section what you would like to see. And maybe we can start looking at some of these more decentralized ones. But we've got to get the numbers. We've got to get the message out to as many people. Finally, we've created our own website, simondixon.com. And in case all else goes wrong, I'll be giving webinars through the Bitcoin Hard Talk free membership portal. Now, if you go over to the blog, you'll see a 5-part blog series. And I'd like to share with you how to protect yourself in many of these mind wars at the moment. You can do that without signing up, and you can just watch the videos, read the blogs, and at the end of it, it will tell you how to self-custody your Bitcoin and give you a course on the Bitcoin Hard Talk membership portal. That's completely free. There's no agenda there. I just want as many people in self-custody. There is one agenda. If you sign up, you give your email, and I'll put you on my newsletter. The reason I put you on my newsletter is because I want to notify you every time I go live and make sure that you get custom information as well. Completely free. I'm just trying to protect myself in case any of these Proof of Weapons Network nodes, technical, industrial complex, warfare weapons start being weaponized against me. So please do all of that, and I will keep giving content. Share this with as many people as possible. We got the whole episode. We put it on a blog. We break it down into AI summaries and shorter chunks. And also we break it down into 3 videos in case you want to say, just share the Bitcoin part and you don't want to share the macro and geopolitical part because maybe you have a reason for that. So we will keep doing that, and we will keep pushing out the content as we transition to this world of Bitcoin, AI, and central bank digital currencies. Do me a favor. I need to get to 102,000 subscribers right now. So if you're not a subscriber and you watch this and you like what you hear, then that's all I ask for you in return, so that we can get over to 102,000 subscribers and get to the next stage. So with that in mind, let's move over to part 2 of Bitcoin Hard Talk, episode 98, Who Assassinated Charlie Kirk? And in part 2, we cover This Week in Macro. And for This Week in Macro, what are we going to be covering? We're going to be covering the construct of fiscal dominance, artificial intelligence, and we're going to be going through how Europe is being used in order to crash the economy using energy, and why that is actually happening. So I'm going to quickly take some water, and then we're going to move into part 2.